I'm here with James Dean, the founder and CEO of ESL UK, to talk about a topic that we increasingly see pop up, the phenomenon we never knew we'd see, the rise of virtual and physical sports in the same arena. Hi, James.
Hi, Heather. Great to be here.
Great, thanks for coming. So we just saw a really cool sizzle reel there of Haddo and lots of people, throwing fireballs at each other. How are esports and physical sports merging today? What's actually out there and how does it work?
I think when we think about what competitive gaming sort of represents, it's about taking things that we can't really do. It's a virtual layer, if you like, on reality in which we can compete. And if you think about then the opposite is a physical thing where we really are grounded. We have to follow these laws of physics, generally speaking. So layering on a level of virtual gamification to these physical sports really starts to gamify them. So in effect, we've got virtual games, video games becoming more physical, and then physical sports becoming more gamified. And we start to really meet in the middle. And you think about all of these analogies and different sports in which you could gamify. I had a conversation the other day about gamifying golf, how amazing it would be if you could start scoring different sort of points metrics and achieving level ups and power ups and different goals during a round of 18. And I think that sort of mentality fits really, really well with millennials and Gen Zs today. And obviously, Haddo is just one example, but I saw just last weekend the e-scooter championship, there's drone championships, there's all sorts of crazy things like airspeeder. And so I think over time, what we'll see is that the younger audience will, well, the participants will start driving that ambition.
Cool. And how natural is it right now for these two sides of the coin, esports and physical sports, to converge right now?
I think it's supernatural with the younger audience, as I say. The aspect of wanting to compete is human nature, and I think the aspect for us to really get into under the skin of all these amazing storylines and lore and various different aspects of a material subject and intellectual property. And we really start believing in that. And the more people that believe in that IP, the more people are interested to see who is the best, who's the one who can come out. And obviously, as that creates a viewership, we start creating a business around that sport. So, in effect, as younger people are just very much early adopters in technology and what you can do with technology, but yet obviously have a human nature of competitiveness. And of course, they want to see who the best is. So I think it's absolutely natural and it's going to happen. Technology is at the point where we're on the brink of augmented reality in a really decent manner. Virtual reality is affordable, but we're also in the next aspect of, even from a production side of things, layering on augmentation and lots of different aspects of the viewing experience is just all there now. And, we've got a lot to thank around the collaboration between the broadcasting industry and that video gaming side of things like esports.
Yeah. And how do you think the physical sports industry, it seems weird to call it physical sports, but has the physical sports industry intentionally or unintentionally pushed itself towards a XR mashup, thanks to its esports dalliance it's had over the last few years?
I think every sport is different, and they obviously, I mean, for starters, traditional sports have a huge amount of heritage. There was something at the beginning that made that sport come about, whether it's racket, a ball, or any form of running or movement. So we have to almost preserve a level of heritage, and I think this has, to some degree, become a barrier for some of these sports to really evolve on a more XR mashup, as you put it. I think where it really does open out is these emerging physical sports where some level of technology is involved at the root.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that goes to show that there is an aspiration to go down that line. It's just, at what point do we as a viewership or a fan base decide, yep, that's a sport or not? And really, it's in the eye of the beholder. If you ask a 10-year-old whether Valorant, the game, is a sport or an esport, or whether tennis is, I think they would say both of them are equally deserving to be a sport.
Yes, and on the esports side of things, is it that kind of point in the esports industry? Is it something of a perfect storm for the XR thing to start to evolve there, for physical sports to start to come into esports?
I think so. I really believe that as broadcasters certainly adopt technology, I think we've seen some amazing innovations over the last 10 years, even where on a broadcast level, augmentation and certain levels of VR experience are reaching an audience, which I think, initially speaking, is creating that more engaging output. I suppose ultimately, if you think about esports, everyone is a participant. It's very mainstay. If you're a viewer of that esport, you also are very likely to play that game. And I
Hmm.
think in an equivalent manner, when you are viewing some of these more modern traditional sports or physical sports, it will be the same mentality. The technology is there, and I'm a participant as much as I am as a viewer. So, in effect, I want this consistent way in which I can interact and engage with this sport that I love. I spend a lot of time doing. I have friends within that group, and therefore I want to sort of compare my performance. I want to see where I rank. Maybe I will become a champion. And in effect, a fan and a participant is the same thing. And XR really does blend that. And
Yeah,
we've been seeing it for esports for years, and I think this is now an opportunity for it to transverse into physical sports too.
cool. And then on that note, on the fans becoming the competitors as well, what are the advantages of the gamification of physical sports? For athletes, but also for viewers.
So I think for athletes, for the participants, it's just more exciting. I think it adds new levels of strategy. You can change things up. I think a really exciting thing is the diversity side of the competition, because
Mm.
with virtual layers, you're able to introduce a level of handicapping, for example. So in effect, you can have different levels of ability playing each other with
Mhm.
some sort of digital way in which you create a common ground. We're seeing that certainly with Hado, where it in effect takes the strength out of that competition, so you can
Yeah,
play against anyone. In effect, it's more about agility and movement and strategy. And then from the fan side of things, it's really about making it far more interesting. And the way it benefits the sport itself is if you increase that engagement, you're going to obviously lead the charge when it comes to growing that viewership, and but more importantly, that extra level of engagement will lead to better monetization, because if you give better experiences to the viewers, they're
mm,
more likely to somehow generate revenue for you, whether that's direct or through a B2B partner or through some advertising or media. And I think that's what really explains, what gives the opportunity.
yeah, yeah. And finally, looking ahead, what conversations are going on right now about what we might see in the future for this area? What might the future of XR sports and physical sports really look like?
What I would love to see, and this is a bit far fetched, but I would love to see that traditional sports, the ones we know and love already within things like the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games and big competition, actually start to gamify themselves. I think about, I've got a 4-year old son, for example. He's well into kicking a football around the garden,
Yeah.
but equally he's striving for that more interactive experience. What happens when those two things come together? It gets very exciting. And we've seen a very young audience start picking up Haddo, for example. So how does this transverse? And then I think taking everyday activity that we would take for granted, maybe like mountain biking, and
Yeah,
adding a kind of more futuristic perspective of competition to that. So that XR layer, if you like, the augmentation, you imagine downhill racing on a mountain bike, but picking up points as long you go as you go, and that
yeah,
generates this amazing fan experience as well as really exciting for the participant. So I just hope that that level of adoption will just naturally transverse every single sport, and by while, and I think it's really important, maintaining that heritage, maintaining where that sport came from, what the core skill set is, but embellishing that. Let's really celebrate and get under the skin of every single moment and movement within that competition.
brilliant. Thank you, James.